Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. So on today's video, we're going to be talking all about Coven red flags and the things that you can look out for and avoid when you're trying to find a magical community. So a few weeks ago, I made a video all about witchcraft communities and how you can find communities both online and in person. And in that video, I did very briefly touch on the idea of covens. But I do suspect that a lot of people don't have a great deal of experience with covens, and they might not necessarily know the warning signs and the red flags that they need to look out for when thinking about joining a coven, so that they can find something that's safe and healthy for them and also the group as a whole. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, all of the red flags and the warning signs that you're going to want to look out for when you are looking for covens. Because I do suspect that when we come out of the topsy-turvy world that we are living in right now, there's going to be a lot of people that are looking to socialize with other members of the community. So I felt like this was a suitable time to post a video all about Coven red flags. Now, some of the points in this video are going to be exceptionally obvious. There are going to be others, however, that maybe aren't red flags by themselves, but if they are seen alongside other pointers that I'm going to mention in this video, you might want to take a step back and really question whether this group is for you. Now, every Coven environment is going to be slightly different, so I am focusing on my own personal experiences and my friends who have been within covens to really bring up a few pointers and the few red flags and warning signs that might let you know that a coven environment is not really a coven, maybe a coven environment is not really safe, and a coven environment that might not be suitable for you and your magical practice. So just as with a lot of my other longer videos, I will be trying my best to put timestamps in the description box for all of the pointers that I'm going to cover, and I have a lot to get through. But just before we get started on the warning signs and pointers, I feel that I really need to explain what a coven is for anyone that maybe isn't experienced with the terminology and the different communities that you might find within the magical community. A coven is essentially a group of practitioners that come together to study and practice witchcraft and ritual work together. Now, you'll often find covens surrounding religions, or you will find covens surrounding magical practice. So you may well find Wiccan covens, but then you may also find elemental witchcraft covens that don't have the same religious background. Now, these groups don't necessarily have to be of any size, but typically you do find between 8 and 20 members depending on the group, although that is definitely going to vary. And typically covens will gather every week, every month, every special season or Sabbat or moon phase. They will come together and gather and do ritual work and celebration together. There are, however, unfortunately, a lot of groups that claim to be covens when actually they are not healthy, they are not particularly safe, and they do often draw in new members who don't necessarily know the warning signs to look out for. So with that being said, let's get into some of the red flags and warning signs that you might see when you're looking for covens. So up first, we have an egotistical leader. Now, this is something that I think a lot of people overlook because they assume that it's really normal for a coven environment, and it really isn't. Covens will typically have 1, 2, or several people that are considered supervisors in a way. They aren't necessarily leaders, but they are the ones that are in control of gathering together people for the meetings, arranging transport, booking locations, bringing items. They're often the ones that understand how the coven works from the inside. They're the ones pulling the strings and making sure that everything works. However, they don't necessarily see themselves as being superior to anyone else. And this is where the issue lies. A lot of people will assume that a coven has a leader and everyone follows the leader, when in reality, a coven is a group. It's a collaborative group and everyone is working together. There may be people with more knowledge or more practical experience. There may be people who are more involved in the coven to make sure that it works and it runs successfully. But ultimately, everyone is considered to be a useful and equal member of that community. And if you have one person who is dismissing everyone else's opinions, they refuse to listen to anyone other than themselves, you'll often find that this is a really toxic environment and it isn't a healthy place to be long term. Next, we have having to pay for membership. Now, different groups are going to work different ways, of course. And when you join certain groups, you might have to pay an entry fee for an event which maybe covers the cost of having a speaker or the food or the drink. And that's completely acceptable. But if a coven is requiring that you pay money for membership and you don't know where any of that money is going, that's a little bit alarming. So typically in a coven environment, everyone chips in. So if you are buying candles and incense and ritual supplies that you're all going to work with, everyone then chips in a small amount of money to pay for these items. So every meeting, you might have to spend a couple of pounds, £5 maybe, to chip in so that your coven can buy the supplies that it needs to do the rituals that they want to do with the items that they want to use. If you are going on a trip and say you're going to Stonehenge or you're going to Glastonbury, it's very acceptable for every single member of the coven to chip in so that you can hire a van so that you can go on this trip. But if you are giving the coven a lot of money to be a member, and then you're not seeing where any of that money is going, that is a massive red flag. Typically, coven membership is based on how well you mesh with a group. It isn't based on how much money you have. And if you have to pay to enter into a group, and then you have no idea where any of that money is going, you aren't seeing it in supplies, you aren't seeing it in locations, it's just disappearing and no one will give you an answer, it's likely that they're trying to make money out of the coven members rather than trying to share experiences and knowledge. So if you're being told that you have to pay a very large upfront fee for joining a coven, I would turn away and do not even participate in that coven at all. Because a coven shouldn't be a money-making scheme. They shouldn't be asking for hundreds and hundreds of pounds out of the members of that coven, and they also shouldn't be draining you dry simply so that you can participate in communal events. Of course, chipping in on supplies that everyone is using is normal, it's accepted. But if you're spending a huge amount of money just to be a part of a group, then you aren't really part of that group. They just want your money. So definitely, if they're asking for a whole lot of money, walk away. It's not worth it. Now, a really big one that I have seen happen too often is when a coven either has gender or sexual identity requirements. Now, this is one of those giant red flags that most people will be aware is wrong, but it is something that sometimes gets slipped through the cracks, especially if you don't necessarily know how a coven environment works. So if the coven requires you to have a specific gender identity or sexual identity, it's really important to ask the question, why? You may find that certain covens do only accept a specific gender identity, and that in itself is not problematic. If you are non-binary, there are lots of covens out there that are just full of other non-binary individuals that you might really resonate with. If you feel safer being in an environment with solely female identifying members, then that is something that you can join as well. However, there is definitely a point where this becomes hazardous, and this is something that has been seen far too often within the magical community, and that is when the leaders of a coven are of a specific gender and sexual identity, and then they only initiate members that are of their desired sexual identity and gender identity, and then there becomes a real problematic dynamic there, because they are then only initiating people that they feel sexually attracted to. And this is something that we should not allow to go on. Of course, in every coven, there is going to be the potential for people to be attracted to other people. But when you have covens where the leaders are all of one particular gender or sexual identity, and they're only initiating people that they are sexually attracted to, that can lead down a very dark rabbit hole, and I don't want anyone being put in a difficult situation because of that. So if there are any requirements on sexual or gender identity, please ask the question of why. And if anything feels off or wrong to you, take a step back. It's not worth it. You will eventually find another group that's better suited for you and that's generally a safer environment. Another red flag that's on a similar vein to the first point is always watch out for covens that put their leader on a pedestal. Now, when it comes to covens, you will often find that there are individual members that are often pulling the strings on the rest of the coven. As I mentioned earlier, these are typically the ones that are arranging the location. They are booking the vans, they are buying the items so that everyone can then work together collaboratively to use them. However, if the members of the coven are putting their leader on a pedestal and treating them almost like a higher power or a god, that is a really hazardous thing. Now, I find that this often occurs because narcissists really love power, and they're also very attracted to groups like covens because they have the potential to gain power very quickly with manipulation and wordplay. And so oftentimes you will find covens that basically worship the person that's in charge, which is not the ideal way of working. And unfortunately, a lot of people do fall into the trap of joining these covens, especially if they are from a religion or a tradition that does worship a higher power rather than working with a higher power. So when it comes to covens, typically the leader positions are rotated around the coven. There might be a set group of people that always pull the strings on arranging things, but the titles of power, things like high priestess or priest, or whichever titles are being used to denote some form of wisdom and knowledge, are often passed around between members. Often you'll find that every 12 months, every 2 years, the titles are passed to a different member, so that every member of the community is able to fulfill different roles within that coven during their time there. If you find that a coven has had the same high priestess for 15 years and they are worshipped like a goddess, that is real alarm bells for me, because it shows that they consider themselves higher than everyone else. And ultimately, they aren't pulling the same weight as everyone else is because they are put on this pedestal. They can do no wrong. And by putting them on a pedestal, you also give them the opportunity to do more bad things and not be held accountable for it. And that's something that we really need to avoid in these coven environments, because really quickly, if things go south, a coven can turn into a cult real damn quick. And that is not what we want to be a part of. Now, continuing on with their leader being somehow more powerful, are covens where the leader claims that they have special abilities or are the only one who can commune with a specific spirit or a deity, and therefore they have to lead. Now, this has been seen quite a lot, and it's very sad that it does still continue. The idea being that a certain individual is capable of doing something that the other members of the coven can't, and so therefore they are better than you are. And this is really not a good thing. Everyone within a coven has their place. They have their purpose. Everyone works together. And if one person considers themselves higher than thou, then it ends up being a very toxic environment. So if you are interested in a coven and they claim that they are the only voice of Hecate, then I would turn around and walk away really, really quick. Because although a lot of people within the community are able to communicate with spirits, with ancestors, with deities, that doesn't make them any better than anyone else in the community. And I think that's really important to push here. Different people are going to have different abilities, and having certain abilities doesn't necessarily make you better than anyone else. And if someone does think that being able to commune with a specific spirit makes them better than everyone else in that group, that isn't really a healthy environment that you want to be a part of. Now, there's a really big one that I'm going to touch on really briefly because I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, and that is abuse of any kind. If you experience verbal, physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, even if you think it's nothing, even if it only happens briefly or occasionally, or they apologize for it, leave. It's not worth it. It's meant to be a safe, trusting environment where people can work and learn together. And the moment any form of abuse is involved in that environment, no matter how small, you need to leave, because it's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for your mental health. And it's just safer and just better for everyone to get out of that situation as quickly as you can, because they might apologize for it, but they will do it again. And so it's better once you see the first sign of physical, emotional, sexual, or mental abuse, get out of there. Keep yourself safe first. Now, next up, we have a point that I think a lot of people would miss as a red flag, especially if you're really excited to join a coven environment, and that is immediate initiation. Now, I think it's really important here to remember that every single coven is going to have a different initiatory process depending on the tradition and the background. I'm just going to be speaking from my personal experience and the experiences of my friends, but typically a coven will not initiate anyone immediately, because you really need to get a feel of whether that person is going to mesh with the rest of the group. It's a very finely tuned machine. and one incorrect person can destroy the energy of the entire group. And so you'll often find that the people that are a part of a coven have known each other for a really long time, or they will have gone through an extensive process of testing and training to see whether they are suitable for that environment. Because everyone in that coven wants to work for the betterment of everyone there, as well as the person that's coming in. And so they don't want to be putting someone into a coven that's going to annoy other people, that doesn't get on with other people, who practices something very, very different from everyone else. So if you are looking at joining a coven and they accept you immediately, that is a red flag if I have ever seen one. Because typically that means one of two things. Either they are a very young coven that doesn't have enough members yet, or they have a very high member turnover rate, which means something is going on within that coven that means people don't want to stick around, and so they want to replace lost members as quickly as possible. Now, there's not necessarily anything wrong with a very new coven. However, because it is so finely balanced, if you bring someone into that environment that just isn't suitable, then you have the potential to ruin that environment for everyone else. And so oftentimes covens will have an initiation process that takes weeks, months, sometimes years. Oftentimes it is a year and a day until someone is formally initiated into that coven. Sometimes it might be longer depending on the process that each individual coven takes, because ultimately they want it to be for the betterment of everyone. So if you see a coven that wants members right now, you turn up to the first meeting and they initiate you right there and then, and you are a full-bodied member of that community, that is a little bit worrying, because it means that the members often don't have enough time to see whether they work with other members. You might find that disagreements happen more readily, or that magical practice simply doesn't manifest in the way that you want it to, because you might have lots of different members who have lots of different techniques and energies and practices that maybe don't work well together. Now, following the idea of initiation is the idea of hazing. Now, hazing is not something that is as commonly seen today, but it definitely does still happen in certain groups, and it really shouldn't. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what hazing is, I'll be honest, I didn't really know what it was until a few months ago, and then I was like, wow, that is really dodgy. I don't like the sound of that. Essentially, hazing is an initiatory process where the person who wants to be initiated is put through a lot of dangerous trials, either physically dangerous, emotionally dangerous, where they are tested to see their willingness to join a particular group. It's something that has been spoken about a lot when it comes to societies, and it is exceptionally dangerous and should not be undertaken under any circumstance. Now, some covens do implement hazing as a way to prove that the person that they are initiating is willing to be a part of that group. Now, I shouldn't have to explain why it is so dangerous and so bad to be doing hazing when it comes to a coven initiation, but I will touch on it very briefly. The first is that a coven environment is meant to be trusting, it's meant to be respectful, and the act of hazing is essentially to break all of that trust, because you often put them through exceptionally dangerous physical and mental and emotional trials to prove that they want to be part of that group. And the thing is that the initiation process should be enough to prove that a member wants to join, because they have to spend a year, sometimes more, meshing with that group, and they aren't even a member yet. And so hazing isn't necessary, and if anyone is asking you to do anything that you don't feel safe with in the coven or before you've even joined it, please walk away. There are lots of groups out there that will respect you, that won't do anything dangerous like hazing, because it can put you in a very dangerous physical, emotional, or mental situation because of it. So next up, we have covens with no age restriction. Now, these unsettle me in a way I can't even explain. They just deeply unnerve me. Now, when it comes to a coven environment, everyone is essentially meant to be on the same page. We know what we're doing, we know why we're doing it, we know how we do it, and we know what the outcome is going to be. Everyone is an understanding participant of that working, of that environment. And because of this, most covens are age restricted. They are either 18 plus, 21 plus, or 25 plus, sometimes different pluses, depending on the group and its location, so so that everyone is on an even playing field. Everyone is of legal, consenting age. We all understand each other because we're all on the same page when it comes to life and magical practice. There are some covens out there that do not have age restrictions, which to me is very, very uncomfortable, because even if the adult doesn't necessarily intend it to be so, adults will always have more power than minors or people under legal age, depending on the country. Because we have more wisdom, we're often more understanding of the world around us, we've experienced more, we're often bigger and stronger, we are able to influence younger members, and ultimately that gives a power dynamic that just isn't suitable for a coven environment. Of course, you can make a small coven with your friends of all the same age group, that is not problematic at all, but when you have a formal coven that has members that are 13 and members that are 65, that is a very large difference in power dynamic, and that does lead to problems happening, because even if the adult doesn't necessarily know it, they have power and influence over someone that is a child, essentially. And so if you see a coven where they are initiating members at 13 and at 35, please avoid it. It's much better to find a coven where everyone is on the same page, where everyone is safe and comfortable and an adult. Now, of course, if you are a minor and you do have friends that are of the same age as you, you can certainly make a group among your friendship group. The problem isn't teenagers practicing magic necessarily. The problem is with that power dynamic that happens in the very extreme age differences. And so if you see a coven that's initiating 13-year-olds and 35-year-olds, it is best to just steer clear. Now, a big one out there is any coven that tells you to stop taking your medications, to stop doing medical treatment, to stop seeking mental health, or to change your diet. Now, this is something that I have seen largely over in America. I don't think I've ever known of it happening so much in the UK. But these are essentially covens that believe that magic is a cure-all, and that if you are going to be a practitioner of magic, you have to essentially ignore, push away, or reject modern medicine. And I want to make it really, really clear here, that is not something that you have to do. You can be a magical practitioner and still have modern medicine and still understand science and still appreciate the things that the modern world has given us. There doesn't have to be this hard and fast line where either you are a scientist or you are a witch. There's lots of people out there that are doctors and practice witchcraft, that are vets and practice witchcraft, that are psychologists and practice witchcraft. It isn't an either or, you can do both. And if you find a coven that tells you that you have to stop your medication, you have to stop your mental health support in order to join, they aren't worth joining. Any coven that is going to put you at physical and mental risk by taking you away from modern science and modern medicine that is helping you is not something that you're going to want to join. And there are much better options out there for you that are not going to be detrimental to your physical and mental well-being. Now, another similar one is the idea of a coven telling you what you can and cannot believe in. Now, there are lots of covens out there that do follow a specific path, so you will often find covens for elemental witches, covens for witches that work with the Fae, or covens for Wiccans. However, if you find a coven that essentially tries to override your own spiritual, magical, and religious belief system for the purpose of being part of that coven, it's not worth joining. There are so many covens and groups out there that you will likely be able to find one that matches up with what your personal belief system is and how you choose to practice. Don't squish yourself into a box that you don't belong to just so that you can be a part of the group, because ultimately it's not going to be a happy environment. In covens, you really want to be able to express yourself spiritually, religiously, and energetically in a way that you find comfortable. And if you are having to practice a certain kind of magic because you are in a group that really doesn't work for you, then I would recommend staying solitary until you find something that does. Now, I know a lot of people really want to join covens. It's like the be-all and end-all of magical practice. People love the idea of a group of other fellow magical practitioners. But ultimately, if it's not the best decision for you and your magical practice, you can definitely have a well-rounded, fulfilling magical practice as a solitary practitioner until you do find a group of people that practices something and believes in something that you resonate with, rather than having to change your own personal beliefs just to fit in with a coven. Now, another really important one that I think a lot of people realize, but maybe not everyone, is any kind of sexual practice, alcohol, or drugs. Now, these things by themselves aren't necessarily a negative. There are lots of different covens and magical traditions that do work with sex magic, that do use alcohol, and they do also use mind-altering substances within their magical practice and their rituals. That in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. How it becomes a bad thing is if you are forced to participate when you don't want to. So if you are being coerced or forced into undertaking sexual activity with coven members, if you are being told to drink alcohol and to take substances that you don't want to take, then walk away fast, because these are not the kind of people that you want to work with. In a coven environment, you want to feel safe and comfortable. And if people are making you feel unsafe or uncomfortable with anything that they're doing, walk away. You're much better off as a solitary practitioner than you are doing things that you don't agree with or don't want to participate in just because you want to be a part of that group. Next up, we have unnecessary secrecy. Now, when it comes to covens, it's very likely that you have covens near where you live, and you maybe don't know anything about them because they keep themselves secret. Now, some secrecy is to be expected when it comes to magical groups. We've seen it for hundreds of years. There are always secrets that are often kept, especially to the outside world, when it comes to being a member of a secret society or a coven or some other magical organization. However, if that secrecy goes so far to the point that you don't even know who you're working with in this coven environment, it is not a safe place to be. So oftentimes in a coven, you'll often find that magical names are used. These are either given by the coven or you create a name yourself that you use within a coven environment. This is either done to help set the tone for ritual by separating the mundane from the magical, or it's done in groups where different members have the same name. So if there's 3 Susans, they will each have a different magical name so that when you are working together in ritual, you know who you're talking to. This in itself isn't problematic at all. What does become problematic is when you don't know anything about the people that you're working with. If you don't know what any of them are called in real life, if you don't know what they do for a living, if you don't know who they are as a person, and if you have no way of contacting them that's normal. So rather than a secret letter being passed under your door telling you to meet in the middle of the woods at midnight on the new moon, if you can't actually call them or email them or send them a Facebook message or chat with them in some other normal mundane way, this is worrying, because then you don't really know who you're working with. You have no idea who you're interacting with. They could be dangerous people. They could not have your best intentions at heart. If anything went wrong, how are you meant to tell authorities who it is that did that wrong to you if you don't know their name, if you can't properly describe them because they're always wearing ritual clothing? Now, this may also be a sign of a much larger, more widespread problem, and that is that the coven has lost touch with the physical world. If they're always speaking to each other through metaphors and myths, if they're refusing to use normal names and they're using terminology that is only found within the magical community to describe everything in life 24/7, you will likely have found a group that doesn't want to be a part of normal society and has essentially lost touch with the real world. They don't resonate with their actual name because they're so lost in the magical practice that they actually no longer acknowledge the normal world around them, and this has some dangerous associations if it does continue. When you are a magical practitioner, it's important to have one foot on either side of the world, one in the physical world and one in the spiritual, energetic, magical world. That way, you have access to both aspects of life without losing yourself one way or the other. Sometimes in groups, especially if they're so focused on ritual practice, they might lose touch in reality, and that has the potential to put them in danger because they no longer associate with the physical world as being the world that they live in. So if you find a group that refuses to use real names, that refuses to give you any real information about them, do not trust them, do not work with them. It's really important to know who you're dealing with in the real physical world. And I know it can sound really cool to have this secret society that's passing notes under doors, but if you don't know anything about the people that you're working with, you really could be working with absolutely anyone, and they could be very dangerous and you might never know it. We're nearly towards the end now. Next up, we have any group that is trying to distance you from friends and family. Now, unfortunately, this can happen, especially if you do have a group that is run by a particularly narcissistic individual that wants control over their members, not only when they're doing coven meetings, but in every other aspect of life as well. And it can be a very disempowering environment to be in because you no longer know what is right and what is wrong. There's a lot of gaslighting, there's a lot of mistreatment. They will often distance you from your family by using phrases such as, "We are your family now," or they will distance you from your family by telling you how they are the only people that truly understand you. And I think although that might be the case, it might be that they truly understand one aspect of you, or they may become an extension of your family. A coven should not replace the other people within your life, and your magical practice should not be the only aspect of you. Humans are multifaceted. We have loads of aspects to ourselves. We have our music taste, we have our jobs, we have our families, we have our friends, we have socialization, we have our free time, we have our magical time. And if a group is attempting to isolate you, attempting to pull you deeper and deeper into that coven environment, and they are forcing you to spend time with them to the extent that everything else is falling by the wayside, that is really alarming. Typically, a coven will have meetings weekly, monthly, or on specific moon phases or sabbats or special occasions depending on the group. So oftentimes you will find groups meeting every single month on the full moon, where they will do workings, and they will work around your life, your job, your family, your children. A coven isn't meant to replace the other socialization aspects in your life, and if they are trying to, then that is a massive red flag. A coven is an extension of yourself. They can be an additional magical family, but they shouldn't replace the people that you already have in your life that you already see. So if you're noticing that you are missing your kids' football game every single Saturday and you keep telling the coven that you really need to go to it and they keep telling you, no, we're your real family, that is a massive red flag. A coven should not take up so much of your time that you lose yourself in the process. And if they are, it's very much worth taking a step back, grounding yourself again, making sure that you know your place in the physical world as well as the magical world, and then progressing from there. And then lastly, we have probably the most underestimated red flag of them all, and that is if friends and family are telling you that you are changing, that you're not the same person, that you're spending too much time with this group of people that they don't know. That has the chance to be a huge, unmissable red flag that I think so many people miss. Now, it's important to note here that some family and some friends are going to be saying this because they don't accept your magical practice and because they don't want you to be a part of a magical community, simply because they themselves don't see it as being right or correct or part of the right religion. You know those kind of people. However, if your friends and family are usually very supportive of your magical practice, they're happy for you to participate in things as long as you are being safe, and all of a sudden your friends and family are telling you that you're changing, that you're not spending enough time with them, that something about this group isn't sitting right with them, listen to them. Because a lot of people that are being sucked into bad situations, they will refuse to accept that they are in a bad situation because they are so desperate to be a part of a magical community. It's always important to remember that there are lots of magical communities out there, and not all of them are going to be suitable for you. If something isn't right, if there are lots of red flags, if family and friends that are usually very supportive are telling you that you're changing, that something is wrong within this group, please listen to them. Because I know that more often than not, when we are told that something is wrong but we don't yet see it, we will dismiss it. But usually family and friends are the first to see the red flags that you haven't noticed. And so if they're normally supportive, listen to them. Now, ultimately from this video, I don't want to scare you away from covens. There are so many wonderful covens out there, so many groups and communities that will really bring a fulfilling addition to your magical practice. They can offer you support, guidance, wisdom. They can teach you things that you have never known before, and you will be able to practice things that you cannot do by yourself. There are some absolutely amazing groups that will really expand your magical practice and your knowledge further than you ever could have imagined. But where there are good, there is also bad. And I have noticed so much, especially recently, that covens are very romanticized. A lot of people really want to join covens. It seems to be the top priority. A beginner witch immediately wants to join a coven. They want to learn as much as they can from loads of other members. And unfortunately, if you are really interested in joining a coven for the right reasons, there are also a lot of people that are interested in joining a coven for the wrong reasons. Either they want power, or they want people that are susceptible to manipulation. They want an ego trip, or they want to be placed on a pedestal where everyone else can worship them. And so I think it's really important not to romanticize covens too much. They can be absolutely amazing, but we also can't ignore the red flags. There are always going to be covens popping up that are so suitable for you that you can join, that you can love and enjoy your experience in them. But it's really important, don't put the blinkers on, don't pretend that all covens are going to be good, because you might just get yourself into a situation that you don't want to be in. And just a final word before we finish this video, and that is, use your intuition. As a magical practitioner, you're often very in tune with yourself, with your own mind, your body, your emotions, and the energies around you. If you're interacting with someone as part of a coven that you are questioning joining, and something doesn't feel right, your gut is telling you that this is wrong, please listen to it, because more often than not, that gut instinctual feeling is going to be correct. And when you do find a coven that is suitable for you, you'll also know that too. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it didn't scare you off covens too much. I really don't want anyone to be scared to join a coven. I just want people to be cautious, or as cautious as you would be joining any other form of social group. If you did enjoy it, feel free to give it a like. It really, really means so much to me. If you have any other red flags that I have not mentioned in this video, feel free to put them down in the comment section so that other people can be aware of the things to look out for. If you do have any questions, concerns, video ideas, or just want to chit chat with the community down in the comment section, feel free to post a comment. If you do want to chat more in an environment online where you can chat with other members of the community, we do have a Discord server. The link is in the description box. And then I do just want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You guys are absolutely amazing, and you really help support this channel. So thank you guys so much. Your names will be on the end screen in just a moment. So I hope you guys are all staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! I was doing my lipstick a few minutes ago, and I literally put the lipstick straight onto my teeth. Like, I literally just like missed my lips and just went straight into my teeth. And now all I can taste is lipstick. It just like permeated through every single taste bud in my mouth. It's just the taste of lipstick. It's not nice. And I knocked something onto the floor. What is new? I am channeling Dennis the Menace right now. Now, I know that some people are going to say Freddy Krueger, but I was a Dennis the Menace child. Like, that would not be allowed on TV, the same as it was in the 90s. Like, Dennis the Menace was like a 101 for how to be a terrible child. And that was one of my favorite TV shows. And so I'm channeling Dennis the Menace. Not sure how I feel about it. I usually go for black and green, but today we're switching it up. And I have four sheets of information for today's video, because I like giving myself way too much work to do. And it's currently 10:30 at night, so let's see how long this takes. Able to express yourself. What fell? I heard something fall. Now, some secrecy, that's not even a word. Secretiveness, is that a word? Now, some secrecy. I just forgot the word secrecy. I think I am an idiot sometimes. How did I forget the word secrecy?